welcome into another episode of Served with me, Andy Roddick. Straight away, we are going to bring in my partner in crime, Jon Wertheim. Jon, what stood out to you from Indian Wells, which I thought had a great ending with Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Swiatek taking the titles?
Yeah, Carlos Alcaraz defended his title and Iga won too. So what's there to talk about? Boy. What an event. I mean, it kind of had everything, right? We got to reserve a little time for the beekeeper, but we'll sort of sidebar that discussion for now. I never learned so much about vacuum cleaners and apiary maintenance. But no, I think, look, I mean, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Carlos Alcaraz, and you sort of said, let's not be ridiculous. He's 20 years old. He won 2 majors, but let's also not ignore what's been obvious, which is since that Cincinnati final, he hasn't been the same player. Well, guess what? He's back to being the same player. A 20-year-old doesn't usually get in the what have you done for me lately lane, but that's kind of where he was. And boy, did he get back on track. And that was, in a weird way, that was a really pivotal event for him. I think when we look back on his career, we'll be circling this one. He was terrific. The mojo's back. Juan Carlos Ferrero is back. His winning ways are back. I noticed some small adjustments, but I'm sure you can go much deeper on that. And then on the women's side, what's left to say about Iga, except I'll give you this one. Last 20 years, so we'll take Venus out of the equation, maybe Justine Henin. After Serena, I'm not sure there has been a better player. This has gone from, hey, she's ranked number 1 and we all like her, to, let's be clear, this is a generational player here. This was title number 19. I just saw stats. She achieved 19 wins in 22 finals, and she has won 4 majors. Now she has won, I think this was her 8,000th level event. She did her usual, turned in a bagel set to end things off appropriately. And I think we need to, she doesn't help us much, right? Where we're talking about Rafa being so modest last week, she's sort of in the same team self-effacement. But I think we really sort of need to recalibrate this. This is a generational talent, 22 years old. And then in between, those are the 2 winners, obviously, whether it's Shea Sue or Tommy Paul, or we could talk a lot about Medvedev. I'll ask you some questions about him. There were a lot of these sort of sides. It really, honestly, it felt like a major. And you and I, unfortunately, weren't there on the grounds, but following from afar, it really had the feel of a major. And we call it the 5th major, or we joke about it, and it spans nearly as long as a major. But from the breakthroughs to the off-court stories, upsets, we can talk about Novak. In the end, we had 2 towering players, right? We had the number 1 seed on the women's side, we had the defending champ on the men's side, so it seemed like we sort of got a reasonable result in the end. It really had the feel of a 2-week, 128 draw event. They drew nearly 500,000 people. We talked, I think 2 weeks ago, about this being a really special event on the tennis calendar. It did not lose any shine, as the kids say. This was a nice event for tennis.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I got right when I get it right, and I'm also going to tell you what I got wrong, okay? 2 years ago, I was firmly in the camp of, we're going to lose Roger pretty soon. We're going to lose Serena pretty soon. We don't know what we have with Rafa and how long we're going to have it. Novak has so far avoided time, but that will happen as well. There is going to be a vacuum of interest in our sport at that moment because you are replacing your 5 most bankable assets in the game. And what happened? Attendance is through the roof. Record-setting year last year at the U.S. Open. Record-setting year Indian Wells. Lots of stuff that you touched on in your mailbag as far as interest. Sure, Breakpoint goes away. I thought it was like, I just thought they picked the wrong stories and were pretty basic about what they covered. I feel like they tried to boil the ocean. I like the adjustment they made to where now all of a sudden Alcaraz says, okay, I'm not going to do Breakpoint, but if you want me, I'll do my own documentary and let's just cancel Breakpoint and shift to Alcaraz. Seems like the right move after this week, but all that to be said, there is more interest mainstream for tennis than I have seen in a very long time. Projects are getting made outside of it. I know you're working on some documentaries. I know I'm working on a couple of things as well. And tennis projects are getting greenlit at very high levels with very big studios and companies, and people are showing up and there's an interest in it. So I think it's great, especially considering there's not a lot of businesses where you lose your top 5 customers, your top 5 moneymakers. Marvel, at some point they're going to keep remaking the story and they're going to lose a couple of those. I don't know. But, tennis is in such a great spot right now. And it's weird because Swiatek is not the personality where she wants to be in front of the microphone all the time. She wants to let her play do the work. By virtue of all of this going on around, we are going to pay more interest to her much earlier on in her career than if it was just purely like a crossover-based personality situation where someone's thirsty, they have to self-promote themselves to get people to pay attention. So I love this moment for Swiatek. I like what you're saying. The difference is she can struggle. She has not played great in 4 out of the last 5 slams. She always has that. It feels like that Rafa thing where even if she struggles in majors on a slow surface like Indian Wells, on a slow surface like Roland Garros, she is going to continue to win. You feel like it's her versus the field at worst at Roland Garros. So I agree with you totally. I don't think she's under-respected because she's number 1 in the world and everyone realizes that she's won 4 majors, but she's creeping into the territory past a Capriati, past a Kim Clijsters, past, so on and so forth, past a Lindsay Davenport. Doesn't have the volume statistics, but as far as majors, dominance, how often you win, she is entering that kind of rare air category. I totally agree with you on that. I think the story of this tournament was going in, and I think we have some audio that we'll post on the Serve Podcast social page. I'm sure Social Sophia will be all over it. But going into the tournament, I said, listen, Carlos doesn't have confidence in buckets. And I love that he came out and said, I was in a little bit of a confidence crisis. I was playing terribly in Buenos Aires. And even in Rio, those first couple of games, it just didn't feel normal. We said this surface probably does him more favors than anyone else in the draw of the top guys. Not to say Sinner can't play on it. We saw that he absolutely can play on anything. Medvedev playing on his least favorite hard court and making final 2 years in a row is an accomplishment in itself. But if you're playing well, this surface does more for Carlos's game than anyone else. And he was able to find that confidence, not getting through matches. He got through that first one, lost, played one bad set, and then he was a downhill snowball until he kind of matched up with Sinner. One of the adjustments that I love that he did in the final against Medvedev was using that slice, right? Medvedev is not the kind of guy, you cannot hit that standstill slice to someone like a Rafa or a Sinner who can create their own speed off of a slow ball. Medvedev maxes out every single thing he can out of his game, but what he doesn't have is the ability to create speed a la Federer, Nadal. Novak can do it. Sinner can do it. Rune can do it. Zverev cannot do it on the forehand side as well, but he can't knock you out if you hit an average slice. And what it does with Alcaraz kind of having that awareness is it brings him forward to where all of a sudden he's playing that ball from a foot inside. So when Carlos goes after the next ball, Medvedev is retreating and playing as he's going backwards. He's not in that kind of like octopus defense mode where he's already 5 feet back and is comfortable defending from there. So it was smart for Alcaraz to kind of set some jabs, use that slice as kind of a jab before he goes into the quick haymaker. That was a great adjustment. He established that pattern early. And from there, Medvedev, was having to decide whether he was going to go after that slice and try to force it, which is not natural for him and in the game style that he likes to play. I thought that was a beautiful adjustment by Alcaraz and Coach Juan Carlos Ferrero. I want to get to the coaching of things and how much better Alcaraz was with Ferrero there with problem solving, and people are upset about it for some reason, even though it's in the rules. Like you're punishing a guy for what the rules used to be, which is dumb to me. Also, John, I had a friend send me an email, and it was my friend Josh Swanson, who isn't prone to sending really smart questions, and he did this time in the upset of upsets. He sent me an email basically saying, Sinner said, I became too predictable, right, against Alcaraz after winning that first set. And his question was basically like, what's the thought process behind dominating someone in a first set and also towing the line between, do I switch things up if I'm dominant? Like, how do you become too predictable, and how do you stay away from that when something is working so well. And I thought that was actually a shockingly good question from Josh. Who's going to appreciate me saying that, I'm sure. But it's the little things, right? It's not as if you have a pattern that you're going to get away from, right? It's moving the second serve around the box a little bit, right? Maybe serving and volleying when you're up 40-15 in a game. Hitting a second serve to the forehand when he goes wide, as opposed to kind of nursing the backhand like he was doing early. Maybe it means taking a big swing to the middle. So it's not an out and out change of tactics, right? He's not looking to all of a sudden, I've been winning baseline rallies by playing bully ball, and all of a sudden I'm going to try to get into extended rallies. It's just those little things. That's not so much something that has a direct impact on Carlos in that given point or shot. It's an investment into something that Carlos actually has to think about and process for when he's trying to adjust, right? It's like, okay, every 5 or 6 second serves, he's running it a different direction. So I can't completely sell out and kind of drop way back and try to hit forehands, which he did, right? There is a solve for something, but it's little adjustments where you're basically threatening changing as opposed to out and out. There's no world where you're doing something, it's working, you're up 6-1, so therefore you completely change everything. But I do think it's a nuanced question anyways.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that depends on context, right? Both the opponent, who is he, how many times have you played each other? If these guys were playing for the first time and you win a set 6-1, you'd be crazy to start changing your pitches. The flip side is, if you know this guy's got to come back against him, this is the end. Well, what was that? I think that was, how many times have they played? I think that was, the eighth match? I think there were four.
Yeah, I think Sinner was up 1 if it was 3-2 or 4-3.
4-3, yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I love this rivalry in so many ways. Part of it is just these are the two best players under age 25. They played 8 times. They're 4-4. I think they'd won, going into that match, I think they'd won the same number of titles. Weirdly enough, it's different. It's a lot like Roger and Rafa, different as their bodies are. They weigh like within 2 pounds of each other. I mean, there's just a lot of difference, but also a lot of symmetry. But yeah, I was surprised by the way that match played out after a 6-1 first set. And you got the feeling Sinner said, this is like a Mas Macho match, right? They know these guys don't exist in bubbles. They know the significance. And Sinner comes, he's won the major. He's gotten the head-to-head on the rivalry now. He wins that set 6-1. And suddenly, I didn't necessarily see the tactics nearly as acutely as you did, which will probably be a theme going forward. But I did see a couple little lapses. I saw Alcaraz changing things up. I think it's a great question that your quote unquote friend asks. I just don't know, is the strategy when you're playing a guy for an 8th time and you have all this history already accumulated, they are what they are in terms of momentum coming into this match, and you win a set 6-1, is that the time to start rethinking tactics? But I love this rivalry. I love what these two guys stand for. I like the relationship to each other. These are not necessarily buddies that are going to go shopping together during the off season. At the same time, there's a level of respect. There seems to be an awareness that these are the two torchbearers going forward. And, what did we get? We got a 3-set match, and the guy that won the match went on to win the tournament. And now these two guys who are close in age turned pro the same year. I think Alcaraz now has one more title. Check me on this. So I think now he moved ahead 13-12, but the head-to-head is 4-4. And to your prior point, we may not have Roger, Rafa, Novak. We're going to be just fine here.
Yeah, it did have that element of a heavyweight fight. Like, people were waiting for it. I always say you can tell how big a match is by 30 minutes before the match if the stadium's already half full, for whatever reason. But like, you kind of get that half full stadium a half hour out if people are pumped, ready. And also, like, I thought Sinner ran through that first set and I'm like, has he separated a little bit? Like, is this, I mean, it was 6-1 and it looked like a 6-1 set, right? It didn't look like, and then credit to Alcaraz, right? Started playing a little bit differently, realized he needed to play some drop shots, to play different heights. Going straight through him was not, I don't know that you can go straight through Sinner anymore. I think you have to spread the court. I think the up and back situation, even though he lost a couple of those points where he was hitting a drop shot, what that does, if Sinner knows he's going to that shot over and over, Sinner has to respect it. He has to check step when his split step, it can't be back, right? He all of a sudden has to respect that ball going forward, and therefore Alcaraz has bought himself a foot or two on the body blows. Not totally dissimilar to the way he was bringing Medvedev forward. Not quite the same, because Alcaraz was using the drop shot to kind of set the table against Sinner, where Sinner had to respect it. And against Medvedev, he wasn't going drop shot. He was just hitting that chip to bring Medvedev forward, so then he could create a little bit less space when he went for the body blows. But something that we had inbound of a lot of messages, and thank you to all the listeners who send in feedback, who send in kind of their own analysis, because I do find it interesting. But there are a lot of emails basically about the Ferrero effect and how that affects Carlos mid-match with adjustments. People had feelings about it. What do you think?
Oh man, I'm of two minds here, and it's kind of an interesting case study, because there's nothing illegal going on now, right? I mean, not necessarily supposed to be the Yalta conference between coach and player, but you're allowed to have these interactions, and they take full advantage of that. So on the one hand, you say, great, you guys are using this new rule to your advantage. The coach is imparting some tactical advice. He's encouraging his player. The problem is, A, what happens when the coach isn't there? We got a concrete example of that in Australia when Juan Carlos Ferrero was he was down with a knee injury, and Alcaraz shows up. And honestly, in that match against Zverev, he looked kind of sort of clueless. He did not play with great conviction. Yeah, he didn't have much of a plan there. On the other hand, this is nothing illegal, right? I mean, this is not cheating. This is no different from any other incremental advantage that a player would try to gain within the rules, and it's been very effective. So Juan Carlos Ferrero, great tactician, obviously clearly really knows what buttons to push. I mean, this is not your run-of-the-mill coach-player relationship. I mean, this is more like a father-son relationship. They both talk about that. So it kind of makes sense that the coach, who also is a former number one player, we should add, knows what he's talking about, kind of makes sense that he would take advantage of this. I just, the flip side is not great things happen when the coach isn't there. It doesn't teach great lessons about problem solving and self-sufficiency, but it seems to work for them. What do you say?
Well, listen, we talk about, like, if the coach is not there, like, he's going to have knee surgery all the time. Like, that's why he didn't go to Australia. Like, that's not a thing that he's going to have to deal with. So in my mind, two things can be true. Alcaraz is a better problem solver when Ferrero is there talking to him. Most of us are better problem solvers when we're 24 and 25 as opposed to when we're 20. So it's expediting the learning curve, right? Like, there's no doubt that if you have feedback from a trusted source who's seeing it from a place of 20 some odd years more experience, that's going to be beneficial to you. And now I would ask, what's your point? Is your point just to say that Alcaraz is listening to Ferrero, and so that stinks because well, that doesn't matter, because that's not the fucking rule. Like, is your point like Alcaraz is better with Ferrero there, but it's not going to happen because they're allowed to coach now? So what's the point of even having this conversation? It's a dumb thing to kind of plant your flag on, because you can be proven right and nothing has changed.
And again, we have to stress, nothing illegal is going on here.
Zero.
Maybe it's not within the spirit of the rule. Let me ask you, never mind. All right. Never mind fans complaining on Twitter. What is the effect if you're on the other side of the net? Do you say to yourself, oh my God, this guy's getting, it's like a second, coach on the field, we're getting, this guy's getting advice from us. Or do you say, boy, I kind of like my odds. This kid needs to look to his box between every point. What is, never mind what the fans say, what is the impact of what goes on if you're the opponent?
Well, probably a case-by-case basis. There are some coaches that you probably want to talk too much because they don't know anything. But this specifically, I think it's pretty concrete that based on what we saw in absence of Ferrero and what we've seen when Ferrero is present, it's a small sample size, right? But pretty clearly, he looked lost and didn't problem solve well against Zverev. He would probably tell you that. I would think he would. And conversely, figuring it out against Sinner, he was in a whole world of hurt before they kind of were able to talk and figure it out. But like, if I'm on the other side, like, I used to get mad because it was illegal, right? I had players, certain players that all of a sudden would stand up in the box, and Uncle Tony, someone random would all of a sudden do like a certain clap, and that person would be 16 feet behind the baseline, playing that first ball up and away. So that was annoying. Now, a lot of coaches did it. I'm hypocritical if I criticize it too far because I received hints also. Everyone does. Like, anyone who tells you they didn't is basically just lying to you, right? It's like stealing signs in baseball. But if I'm there and someone's talking and they're doing it within the time allotted and it's legal, what am I complaining about?
Who was the player whose coach banged on the trash can? That's what I want to know. But no, I think here's a quick story. I heard this recently. I wish I remember where I heard about. Novak went into the U.S. Open last year, and he said, "Hey, listen, there's this glove, and you put it on, and it reduces your core temperature. Would it be okay to wear this during changeovers?" And there was a discussion, and they said, "No, that's a piece of equipment. No, we're not going to allow that." But I'm thinking the very fact that this guy is at the time, 23 major champion who was thinking about how am I going to get an incremental advantage? This is what the great ones do. And whether it's hiring Juan Carlos Ferrero and taking full advantage of these new rules that permit instruction, or whether it's wearing a glove that might reduce your core temperature, I have a lot of admiration for that. That is how you, in an individual sport in particular, that's how you win. You find little hacks. You find little incremental advantages that gives you 0.1%. That's still 0.1% more than you had. So I think, if anything, this is something that nods in Juan Carlos Alcaraz's favor, that this is something, listen, I'm taking advantage of everything that's legal to get that slight edge. I'm 100% cool with leaning on a close coach who, again, has been a former number one player. This isn't the guy who was feeding balls at the club.
Well, also, it's like, okay, what's the other option? Like, Carlos and Juan Carlos going, you know what? We shouldn't talk, even though it's completely legal. We should potentially sacrifice this match just to appease the old people on their Twitter fingers a little bit more. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, that makes no sense. All the emails, he's better when Ferrero's there. Yep. And also, I just wrote down when you said the little glove that reduces your core temperature. We definitely can't do that, but we can actually, as a tournament, supply ice towels in the coolers for you to wrap around your neck, which also, drops your core temperature. So that that's mental gymnastics for me. That's just not knowing and panicking that you might make the wrong decision. But your point is made. You're always looking for the next advantage, especially when it's legal. You cannot like it, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all. Quickly, I want to get to some other observations, but besides just winners, semifinalists, I thought Tommy Paul looked great, coming forward a lot more. Volleys looked good, complete game. I thought he might have a chance to sneak that one out against Medvedev, but Medvedev does what Medvedev does and grinds him out at the end. But Tommy Paul, quality week. I thought Ben Shelton looked really good. He's the only one that kind of gave Sinner a half of a headache in that first set in their matchup. I actually like the way that he looked in his first couple of rounds, using his athleticism. He adopted the strategy of dropping way back to return serves, giving him some space. He was hitting that kind of raffle loop lefty forehand. That's becoming more effective. Checking down that backhand slice up the line to drive traffic to his forehand side. I thought he made a lot of really positive adjustments. That court and that surface is going to be very good for Ben moving forward in his career. In the future, I thought Taylor Fritz looked really good. Lost a match to Rune, but it was one of those where I watched the whole thing and I'm going, he played well. Like, he's not going to walk off that court going, I didn't hit the ball great. Rune just played a great match. It's the best I've seen Rune probably since like Monte-Carlo, maybe last year. Maybe Rome beating Novak in the semis. But for a long time, Rune hasn't looked that good. I don't think in 8 months. Francis, there's a little bit of a, if it's not a panic, there's a little bit of a flashing red light going on. Down to 22 in the world now, least favorite service. Hopefully he can sneak out a good result in Miami. But you kind of need a hard reset there. We know the talent's there. We all love Francis. But listen, you can't, math is math. And the win-loss record has not been great since the U.S. Open last year. Lehechka is going to be a top 15 player by the end of the year. That's what I think. I think he's better than a lot of the people on the runway ahead of him. He is very impressive. Tsitsipas is struggling to the point where you see someone who plays big, you're like, he's going to have a problem with them. I think he's, it used to be he was behind the big three. Now kind of Medvedev has crept. It's a different conversation between him and Medvedev. Carlos has a different conversation. Sinner is a different conversation, and then you're getting to the Fritzes and who do you think is more likely to, throw a knockout blow against a top player. So for Steph, the clay court season can't come soon enough. I'm legitimately concerned. We treated him dropping to 11 like he would just pop right back into the top 10. I don't know that that's going to happen that quickly. I hope I'm wrong, because I think he's great for the game stylistically. We need players with that flair. I don't want to see that style of play go by the wayside. And so I'd like to see him make that turn. Emma Navarro, I couldn't be more impressed with her. Goes into the top 20, doesn't beat herself, right? Serves to spots, stays in, and she's kind of almost rivaling Rybakina for the least excited winner trophy award. Like, just does her business, creates a little shape on that forehand side. Great win against Sabalenka. Coco does what Coco does. Like, she's the best struggle player maybe on earth, where the serve isn't working, the forehand wasn't working. All of a sudden, she still grinds out a semifinal and was this close to making a final. I don't think she's played her best tennis this season so far, and she has a semi in Australia, a semi at Indian Wells. Her bad stuff is still top 6 or 7 in the world, which is simultaneously like you don't want to have to rely on it as much as she is currently. But it's a great problem to have. I thought Sabalenka was, she hasn't played well since Australia, but winning a slam kind of buys you a bunch of leeway as far as kind of in the moment conversation. Something I want you to comment on is I could not be more impressed by these Ukrainian women dealing with what they're dealing with, their families in danger every day by virtue of the war. Kostyuk semifinal in Indian Wells. Svitolina still playing great, up to 17 in the world. Yastremska unfortunately had to retire in this term, but making the semis in Australia. It's not easy putting up results when everything is great in your life. Just a quick thought on what they're going through, and literally, figuratively, their families are literally fighting through it. They are fighting through it on the tour and coming up with results, and I'm happy to see it every time they do.
Yeah, I think you put that really well. I mean, we talk about overcoming obstacles. We talk about adversity players are facing. Well, we're more than 2 years into this now. And this isn't just, tennis clubs being bombed. These are family members being displaced. Svitolina, we talk about her return from maternity leave. I don't know if we've talked enough about what she has done, not just in terms of her tennis and her game. I mean, she's basically single-handedly funding the Ukrainian Tennis Federation right now. And they are using their platform. This has been a topic that they've all sort of embraced. And said, listen, I have the good fortune of getting a smoothie and sushi and being on this international circuit. I'm going to use this platform. I mean, honestly, it's as far as I know, at least since I've covered the sport, kind of unprecedented, right? I mean, to have this going on in your home country, to have a war that now is 25, 26 months, they see the news, they see Putin's re-election. Keep in mind, too, that they are competing on an international tour with players from the country that unilaterally invaded theirs. I mean, there is so much dynamic here. And the fact that, at least on the women's side, you're right. And we should also point out on the men's side, 2 players you played against are now serving on the front lines.
Yeah,
so we're talking mostly Goski, right. So we're talking mostly about women. Oh, yeah, good reason, because a lot of the men are actually serving in the armed forces for their country. But I mean, I don't think we talk about the story enough. I mean, again, it's been 2 years. We had the Russian ranking ban. We had some of the controversy from 2022. This war, this brutality, the absolute blight on humanity that is Putin, that has not subsided in the last 25 months. And to see these women, Kalinina too, who got to the Rome final last year. I mean, to see this ascent of Ukrainian women's tennis is something that I don't think we've talked about enough. The easy sort of pop psychology is tennis is refuge. This is a place where they can channel all that feeling. The tennis court is their safe space. I don't buy that. I think this is really heroic, and I think we are going to learn a lot more about what these players have faced. I think the story of Svitolina basically bankrolling tennis in her country to make sure that it's an amazing story. I'm glad you brought that up. And do you ever, sometimes fans go to tournaments and say, hey, who should I cheer for? And you know what?
Yes.
We all love Novak's great. We all love Coco. they don't need your applause. Go to court 17 and
Yes.
find Marta Kostyuk playing her
Yes.
first round match. That's a player who could use your support at her next event.
Hell yes. Well said. Just happy, proud. Can't imagine what the mental scar tissue is of just worrying every day. And also happy to see, listen, tennis is not important in the grand scheme of anything, but seeing someone who is dealing with real life stuff, having good moments like a Kostyuk this week or a Svitolina consistently, Svitolina funding this thing, she's going to end up with a statue. And that's the least they could do, right? For what she is doing and how she's coming. And oh, by the way, being a mother to a toddler and an infant, like, throw that in also while traveling around the world. Like I have a hard time with any single of the, I mean, it's just props, all the respect in the world. This Novak, I'm going to get in trouble with Novak fans because I'm going to be critical here. And then I'm going to defend him on the other side, which seems pretty consistent. And I'm going to get one segment of fans that only focus on the criticism and go crazy. And then they're, another side of the other two guys, they're going to criticize me for, defending him on the other side. But take me back to this Novak Nardi, like the result aside, it's an outlier. Novak is not supposed to be dominating tennis at 37 years old. The fact that he has is nuts. So all this, like, what's wrong with him? What's going on? Like, he could never win another match. Legacy is entrenched, stone. I personally think he'll win more. He'll win more slams. Too early for panic. But break down specifically what happened this Novak Nardi match. We haven't talked about it. What is your take on this stoppage of play? Novak getting mad, kind of throwing a bit of a tantrum, not letting it go at the handshake after a week of great publicity on the front side with the UCLA practices and kind of all the social content. Here we are again.
I don't know. I mean, I'm eager for your interpretation of this because some of this, I give a lot of leeway to athletes in these hot, aroused states. And you're in the middle of a match. You've got this neurochemistry. You know what the deal is. You're allowed to lose to Jannik Sinner on an off day in a best-of-5 match in the major. You're playing a lucky loser outside the top 100 who's closer to your kid's age than he is to yours. You've got to do something to shake things up. So I don't even think this was a legitimate criticism. I think this is just a sort of gamesmanship by Novak to try and get in this kid's head. I don't think he had much of a leg to stand on. I agree with you, too. At some point, you got to let it go. I mean, the fact that it came up at the handshake, I'm curious what a former player would make of this. Because from what I saw, Novak basically didn't have a leg to stand on. This wasn't Rublev. I mean, this wasn't something where he should have been ejected from the tournament. It just seemed a little beneath him. I mean, it just seemed beneath him. But I also wonder, look, you get in these desperate situations, the guy on the other side of the net doesn't have 1/100th of your experience. You've seen enough of these matches to know that one little hinge point moment can completely change the complexion of a match. Maybe you shake things up. This is not unique to tennis. It just seemed awfully, undignified, maybe ungenerous. It just seemed beneath Novak. But what was your take watching?
Yeah, you're saying like it's a desperation move. I don't see any world where Novak should ever be desperate against someone ranked 123 in the world. One, the guy didn't stop. Like, you watch it, he didn't stop. Like, there's been 27 other clips of where, and I hate this because, like, people turn back the clock 13 years and expect us to remember a certain point. Like, but there are all these things of Novak kind of definitely not stopping, but stopping way more than Nardi did in that point. Nardi did not stop. And even if your opponent stops, that doesn't mean that you have to. Quite the opposite. If they stop, you keep going, you win the point. So it's like to choose to, one, be wrong about what someone else is doing, then make the wrong decision on continuation, then make a stink about it to the ref, and then mention it to a young player who just had the biggest moment of their lives at the handshake is just an unforced error in my mind. And this is on the heels of people coming around and like just saying it for what it is. He's the best of all time. This is on the heels of, last week I got upset on the other side because he doesn't get enough credit for how friendly he is in the locker room. Doesn't mean you have to agree with every decision that's ever been made, but generally, if you see Novak and you pass him and you say, "Hey man, how's it going?" There's going to be a smile. He's going to be engaged. He's going to be friendly. There is no doubt about that. Okay. So for this, I just get frustrated because I'm like, you have all of this goodwill that you're building throughout the week. There's all these social clips going, in, and he probably doesn't care about it. We probably care about it more than he does, which is fine. But it's it has to stop. It's probably what makes him great is that he's obsessed with these little moments, but mentioning it to the guy afterwards and stealing some of his joy or taking some of his joy sucks. When he got defaulted at the US Open, biggest fluke I've ever seen. There was no choice but to default him, but then he left without doing press, right? You know how much credit he gets if he goes into that press conference and be like, it's my fault. It's the most unlucky thing. It was with zero intent. Unlucky, but I put myself at luck's doorstep. Over, done with, never talked about again. We're not talking about it for 5 days. Okay, so that's my piece on that. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think more charitably, we can say, hey, this is great. He is who he is. And yes, there is this huge conflict with him where his tennis is so buttoned up. In some ways, he is so professional, and then he has these absolutely bizarre lapses, these unforced errors, as you put it. The other flip side, more charitably, is saying, listen, at least he cares. Some athletes get to the end, and it's happy to be here. I'll salute the crowd. I mean, it says something about his frustration that at age 37 almost, he is still disengaged. No, I mean, I think in some ways, this is a bit of a familiar pattern where he has, if you're inside tennis, he's a good guy. Yep. He's not this tennis devil. He's not the bad boy. He's not Nastasi. He's a fundamentally good person who has these lapses that certainly Roger and Rafa did not have. And in some ways, great. He is who he is. He doesn't have to be completely consistent. I'm always just surprised. This is so at odds with his tennis, which is so crisp and so sharp and so precise. And then whether it's the Adria Tour or throwing his racket at the Olympics, he has these every 2 months, he has one of these lapses of sort of it's like chutes and ladders you play with your kids. You do these silly things and you backslide. And in the public eye, they see him somehow tainting 20-year-old Nardi's biggest win of his night, biggest night of his career. And they say, why does he have to be like that? What a jerk. Roger and Rafa would never have done that. And he sort of loses the capital that he amassed. But no, I mean, I think, look, it wasn't his proudest moment. It doesn't contaminate his career. It's been a slow start to the season. I agree with you. I think he'll get back to winning. I think he's in a very strange, I don't know if you saw that tweet. I mean, that is not your average, that's not the conventional statement when you pull out of a tournament. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think he's I have my own theories on that. I think he's in a bit of a strange period. I do not think this was his proudest moment. I suspect next time he sees Nardi, he's going to congratulate him. They'll apologize.
I think that's true. I think that's true
with our lives.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in the rear view, I think he would probably agree. If you watch a replay, I don't know how you still sit by that opinion, frankly, but we don't have that benefit in real time. Listen, I'm as guilty of anyone as valuing my feelings on court over the facts of the situation. The frustrating part of covering Novak is you want him to have that that unilateral support and you get the benefit of the doubt and the whole thing. He does the hardest things on earth so well, and he these little things are just. And they consistently kind of just fester. And also, before we close and we're done and we go to James in the next segment, also the people who, he was at a game, trading jerseys and a racket with Steph Curry, did a lot of PR, was at every opening the week before Indian Wells. And everyone's like, well, he needs to focus. He doesn't need to do anything. He knows what to do to put himself in position. He is in his... as Taylor Allison Swift would say, he is in his legacy era. He is. That doesn't mean he can't continue to dominate, right? He knows what to do. This loss is going to piss him off. But also, yes, family is going to take hold. He is 37 years old. He is a maniac, start to finish every day, and has been for 20 years in a good way, right? Like in a good way. I mean that in a very complimentary phase. So Nole fans, don't go full Twitter finger and annihilate me again and again. But it is this hard thing. But everyone who's like, he shouldn't go to a Warriors game after a fluke loss and associate with other people who are like the greatest ever, that is dumb. That's so dumb. Like he's a grown-up. If he wants to go to something, he knows what to do. Like, you're telling me you know what's better for him in this moment than he does in regards to tennis and putting himself in position to win? That's like pretty arrogant of someone to think, right? I mean, am I wrong on that?
It's also, I think, flawed thinking that, it's very easy to say they need to focus. This goes way beyond Novak.
Stupid.
This goes beyond tennis. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take your kids out and go to Chuck E. Cheese. The best thing you can do is hang out with Steph Curry and clear your mind. I think we draw this kind of this parallel relationship between success and focus.
Yep.
Sometimes you need to focus less and not more, and that goes not just for Novak Djokovic, not just for tennis players, but probably for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's right. But even with that being said, John, I need you to focus, rest up for next week, because we're in the zone, man. We're doing it. We are in the zone. Rest up. I don't want you to go out to dinner. I don't want you to speak to anyone, just to make sure you are fully here for next week's episode.
I'll tell my wife we'll see each other in 8 days.
No, you didn't understand me. You're not allowed to talk to her either.
We'll text.
Full focus. Yeah, one text, and then hopefully she'll understand. Should be great. All right, thanks, John.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Always an absolute pleasure. Like us, subscribe us, do all the things. Growth is amazing week over week. I feel like we're really building something fun together. We appreciate you paying attention. We appreciate your feedback. I appreciate people walking up to me in my hometown and now not talking about, God knows what from tennis, but talking about the podcast. That's so much fun for me. So we appreciate you. We will see you this Sunday on T2. And as always, Tuesday mornings, we release the full podcast. Thank you for listening to Served. I'm Andy Roddick.